Okay, so I think we'll get started now. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to welcome you to today's webinar, where we'll discover how to maximize Iguana's potential beyond healthcare. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. I'm Emily, the sales coordinator here at INTERFACEWARE, and I'll be your host. Leading today's webinar, we have my colleague, sales engineer Regaah Ragunathan. Regaah has been with INTERFACEWARE for over 3 years and has experience on both the customer solutions and sales teams. Having worked extensively with customers across various industries, she is an expert in helping customers identify and solve their unique business challenges with Iguana. Today, you will learn how to leverage Iguana's versatility beyond healthcare-specific integrations and learn how to identify gaps within your organization's processes. Regaah will also provide hands-on guidance on implementing seamless integrations and will be going over some real-world applications and best practices. Feel free to ask any questions in real time throughout the webinar using the Q&A chat in your Zoom window. If we don't answer your question right away, we'll try our best to answer in our Q&A period at the end of the session. We'll also have a couple of polls throughout that we encourage participation in. Finally, a recording of the webinar will be provided afterwards, so look out for that in your inbox. It's now my pleasure to hand over the floor to Regaah.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily, for that introduction. Welcome, everyone. In today's webinar, we're going beyond healthcare, integrations with Iguana. So let's have a look at what we'll be covering over the next hour. We'll explore how to automate your business processes, simplifying tasks across various applications. We'll tackle common challenges, share workflow automation insights, and even dive into a couple of live demos. So we all work in companies with various departments, and a lot of your day-to-day tasks do involve accessing key information that is essentially siloed into different systems. So majority of you may be coming from either a healthcare background or just outside of that realm. You may even have worked with Iguana before, but one of the main reasons why we did want to do this webinar is because you'll learn how Iguana can play that pivotal role in connecting your internal operating systems for any documentation needs or even customer relationship management systems, and in order to ease that routine responsibilities. So let's get ready for a practical session on simplifying your daily tasks using Iguana. As many of you are aware, we're all familiar with Iguana being that healthcare integration engine. So it could connect to with any system, any data type, whether it's a database like MySQL, SQL Server, APIs like web services, file systems like SFTP or FTP, working with even PDF files, CSV files, or even batch processes. So just given in the healthcare industry, Iguana was designed to facilitate that exchange of data between various healthcare systems and applications. You may know it's well suited for integrating electronic health records, laboratory, radiology, billing systems, and then any other healthcare applications. But it also does provide tools and features to develop custom interfaces like transforming or even mapping your data from one to another. So most people are familiar with using Iguana for various use cases, for example, like pulling patient data that's stored in a database or even connecting to an EMR via an API. But this flexibility does extend beyond the healthcare realm, especially given its capabilities to connect with databases and even APIs. So within your organization or even outside your organization, we're going to be talking about how you can use Iguana just beyond an HL7 integration engine. And we ourselves here, even at INTERFACEWARE, we do use Iguana in our internal workflow, anywhere from our customer support team to our sales team, marketing, and even finance. So you may wonder, how can you do more? So because we do have that capability to connect to databases, APIs, file systems, that forms that backbone of most commonly used business software applications today. If you already understand all of these universal protocols, it enables integration across diverse, even software applications as well. So when it comes to optimizing internal workflows, Iguana can connect to systems such as CRMs like Salesforce, accounting software, project management systems, and then more. And then we can also interact with batch processes, process various file types, and then engage with internal bases as well. So these connections also expand Iguana's ability to provide updates and notifications whenever something occurs in one of these systems that other parties should be made aware of. But some of the main systems that we use Iguana currently for, even to connect internally, is even just Pipedrive, Google Drive, and other project management platforms. So let's start by understanding the core concept. You may wonder what we mean by common business workflows. So let's think about just your everyday routine. You might come into work, log in, you may check your email or even messages. And then depending on your role, you probably got one or more platforms or applications you use to manage and do the bulk of your work. You can have a CRM system, a marketing software, project management software, support ticketing system, accounting software, and more. But maybe even a few other supplementary applications or systems like shared file drives as well. So one thing that you can kind of see that although we already have quite a list of applications and systems that you typically need to work with on a daily basis, and just looking at the main applications you use manage to work and even communicate with your team. Essentially, when you do combine this with each department's specific needs, this does result in a wide assortment of applications that are used for business workflows throughout your entire organization. So you may be familiar with some of these applications that you interact with day to day. Maybe it's just not one application, but you can be interacting with multiple like Gmail, Salesforce, Jira, or even GitHub. But Iguana is compatible with all these diverse applications, and you may be able to seamlessly integrate it with your existing software ecosystem. So we do all work in companies with various departments. There could be a sales team, IT, maybe even support. So the challenge with that is with so many applications, a lot of the key information that you need on a regular basis is siloed into different systems. And you do have to spend a lot of time and effort hopping between one application to another. So a perfect scenario would be just to have one tool that stores all of your information you need to access. But of course, each tool has its own unique capabilities like documentation, communication, or even marketing. But this essentially just makes it difficult to easily even access this information that you need, which actually does lead us to our first poll of the day. So I'll hand it over to Emily.
Thanks, Regaah. So we'll be moving into our first poll. Just a reminder that this is 100% anonymous, and we really value your participation. So we'd like to know, how much time do you lose to repetitive manual tasks? A little bit. Most of your processes are automated. Moderate. You have several repetitive manual workflows that don't affect project timelines whatsoever. A substantial amount. You spend substantial time and resources on manual workflows, but meet most of your goals on time. Or too much. You struggle to meet project timelines or manage your priorities due to repetitive manual tasks. So I see lots of answers coming in, but it will still give everybody 15 seconds or so. Just about 5 to 10 more seconds for everybody to get their answers in. About 5 more seconds. Okay. So looking at the results, 63% of you have shared that you do spend a substantial amount of time on manual tasks. So today we'll be teaching you how Iguana can help you work more efficiently. And just as a reminder, we will be having a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So if we haven't answered a question you submitted in the Q&A chat window yet, we'll do our best to answer it at the end.
All right, thanks, Emily. Now let's see how this can be relatable. So let's take a look at an example. So sometimes we may need to communicate key information between different departments and teams, but it can be difficult if something is urgently needed, and say if a key person is away, or if that process requires hopping in and out of different software systems, especially if you don't even have access to that system itself. So even from a management perspective, there's also a lot of information day to day that it's hard to summarize just as a big picture in terms of reporting or even analysis needs. So just looking at this example, we can even extrapolate a few individual workflows. For instance, integrations from Pipedrive to Google Drive to allow you to view projects quicker, or even ClickUp to Pipedrive, automating or updating project statuses, and then even Pipedrive to Jira, so able to instantly view those customer support tickets. But as you can see, all the applications that do come from different departments that you utilize in a day-to-day, it does kind of tie in together. So just going back to that initial example, imagine you're put in the shoes of an account manager in the sales team. You've checked all your emails and messages, and now you want to check in on a specific customer of yours. So you might log into the CRM and then see the notes that there's a few projects in progress for this customer, but you realize that you haven't heard any updates in a while. So now you might need to log into a project management system and then look up those specific projects, or if you don't have access, you have to contact that project manager and then request an update. You also may want to check in on how that customer is doing. So for example, if they haven't sent any recent support tickets, or if there are any updates that need to be made to their contact details. So since those are all siloed into different systems, you have to log into those different applications, again, manually look up that information yourself. So from these examples, we can see that the root issue is how can we retrieve information that is siloed into different systems and application in a way that meets our needs. So if you are retrieving it manually, first, it does require you to have access to multiple systems. So you need to understand how to quickly retrieve that information you need from that system. For example, with the support ticket scenario, if you're from the business side, you may be looking to need a summary or list of, say, of customer support tickets, rather than knowing all the technical details of each ticket. It can be time consuming because it would require more careful verification just to ensure the data is valid. And then the tasks can be repetitive too. So this could even create potential for even mistakes, given that they are tedious tasks. And then of course, will create delays or even gaps in communication, as individuals may need to regularly look up and update that data, especially if there's an urgent issue that might be even prone to more errors as well. So I'm curious to know how many of you are transferring data manually, and I'll actually hand it over to Emily to introduce the next poll.
So moving into our second poll today, we saw that the majority of you do spend a lot of time on manual tasks. So now, how frequently do you encounter issues due to manual data transfer? Rarely, you rarely, if ever, encounter issues. Occasionally, you have occasional issues, but they're manageable. Frequently, you frequently encounter issues. Very frequently, you're weighed down by fixing issues all the time. Constantly, you're constantly concerned about data accuracy and or your current system doesn't work. So I see lots of answers coming in. We'll give everybody another 10, 15 seconds or so. Another 5 to 10 seconds to get those answers in. Okay. So looking at the results here, we see that everyone to some degree experiences issues from manual data transfer. So this is quite a common issue. Regaah will now be walking us through how to automate workflows.
Great, thanks, Emily. That does give us a leadway to the next topic. So how can we even automate these workflows? So if you're working with popular systems, you may be considering built-in automation options or third-party integration software. Obviously, automation can handle that repetitive, time-consuming tasks like data entry, lead assignment, and follow-up reminders. This, of course, does end up freeing up time for your team to even focus on more of the value-added activities. The long-term benefits often, of course, outweigh the costs as well. So for instance, reduced labor hours and increased productivity can lead to significant cost savings over time. But if you are looking into automating, you may be running into some of the following challenges. So some existing built-in automation options are limited in terms of the complexity of the workflow and to the existing integration. You may wonder, Salesforce has its own integration capability, but sometimes simple conditions or complex ones can be harder to build out. Another point is additional integration software often requires extra cost in money and even training. So some certain integrations also require jumping extra tiers. So if you're from a base, you may have to move up to an enterprise versus what you would normally need. I'm sure there are even customers of ours that are using any built-in third-party automation that can be more native or building a marketplace similar to Salesforce app, Exchange, or even other CRM tools. But again, you may be limited with that built-in automation. But this is where Iguana can come into use and how you can utilize it just to create those internal business workflows, which in that case, it can give you a lot more flexibility at no additional software or even training cost. It does also save time if you already have existing resources building out integrations in Iguana, because they would be more familiar with the platform itself. So it doesn't require any specific training. And then also with cost, you may also have the available channels or interfaces to build that out already. And then even just thinking about reusability, in the upcoming slides, I'll highlight how it can be easy to adapt to ongoing integration needs, especially as your business grows, if your workflow changes, or even if your system changes. But just all in all, these workflows can be created with your available Iguana instance at a simpler way. All right, so we're going to get started with how to identify the gaps and how you can get started with building out these workflows. This is important to do so in the case that you do want a smooth and successful integration process. So first, you would have to identify the needs. Here is where you'll think what might be the benefits to automating your internal business workflows, especially in tools like, for example, CRM or even Jira or even Pipedrive. This does involve careful evaluation of your current processes and understanding where automation can bring significant benefits. So some points to consider are costs, time, and even scalability, and just overall something tedious that you can easily automate. You may even want something that's more centrally accessible as well. So for example, for one of our potential cases, a need was a report that you may want to be able to generate that has summaries of different updates between different departments. So the sales team can see, for example, how projects are going. And then potentially you can do things like identifying if there's a risk or even if invoices haven't been paid. But essentially, once you do discover your need, next is identifying that data. So you can consider data exchange needs, endpoints, security requirements, and any other necessary data transformations or conversions that will be required. So how we would look at it is what data endpoints are necessary. Do we want to read certain fields from an application, generate, or even redirect links? But one thing to note is that this is similar to how you would even approach a healthcare integration problem. So these would be the same type of questions you might ask when you are building out your interface, either being healthcare, business, or even any sort of internal workflows. And then it would be identifying these workflows. Again, similar to identifying the data, it is the same process. So just understanding the workflow, it does ensure that processes from different departments or systems align. So who would be beneficial for what team? Who gets access? Would it be, say, a support team member that again wants to see the stats of support tickets, or a sales team member that wants to check in on an invoice status? And then, of course, how frequently would you be accessing that information? So, for example, seeing stats monthly or even accessing links to company Google Drive daily. And then you can also look into notifications if that's something that's preferred. But all in all, just doing that project management scoping. Once you have identified the major gaps, you can then get started with building out the interfaces. So you may be familiar with some of the common system endpoints or protocols used in integration. In the past, you may have worked with APIs or only just file-based systems or even databases. But one of the key aspects when integrating with all these tools like CRMs is APIs, and Iguana can manage APIs, allowing you to connect with external services and leveraging that functionality in your workflows. Even additionally, with Iguana's capability to read CSV or even Excel files, we can process, read, and even send to either any cloud platform or database, depending on the workflow. So if APIs are something that you're not too familiar with, over the next few slides, I'm going to be going over some of the strategies to help get you started just to build out an API integration. All right, so first things first is reading or obtaining that API documentation. So this is usually provided by the service you want to connect to. And this document outlines the endpoints and the authentication methods, requests, and even the response formats and any other special consideration. So if you gain access to API documentation, there should be an endpoint that allows you to retrieve that metadata regarding various resources or even objects. Otherwise, they may simply just provide that metadata in a JSON or even an XML file that you can download. So I do have a similar example just in the bottom if you do want to connect to Pipedrive's API reference or even Athena Health and how that might look like. So you can see that there are different endpoints to retrieve, update that data. It also provides the required and optional parameters needed to create that request. And any authorization methods needed, it also does give you the option to test it out in either Postman or even some sort of a sandbox. And then the next is credentials. Depending on the API, you might need to use API keys. So there's OAuth, JWT, or any other authentication methods. Even accessing the API token, you may be able to just find that in your user account settings, say if it's Pipedrive or ClickUp, for example. But it is important to understand which method is required so that you can implement it accordingly. It's also important to encrypt any credentials that are used, and we luckily do have an encrypt password module if you haven't used it before that you can simply load into your interfaces. And then if you're not too familiar, we also have a store module, which we use for caching tokens or even expiry dates, and that's just found in our pre-built modules in Iguana. But once you have chose the right authentication method, you would have to select the appropriate HTTP method. So meaning that if you need to retrieve that data, it would be a GET request. If you're sending that data, it would be a POST request, and then updating would be that PUT request. And then next is building out your API tools. So some of the suggestions on how you can even modularize API connections or functions for reusability. So similar to even building Lego box, for instance, where instead of making one big complicated structure, you can create smaller parts that can be used over and over again. So if you know for sure you're connecting to that API once, it doesn't make sense to just build a super complex module or set of modules unless you can really abstract out the parts of the code that can be used for all of those APIs. For instance, you could even create a special or separate module dedicated to handling any credentials or even common HTTP parameters that need to be used, similar to how I have this API call function. So if it was Salesforce, for example, we would just have to have details like the consumer key, the consumer secret, and the Salesforce username and password. But when this template is created, you can use it over and over again, and you will just need to update its credentials in your configuration module. So with Iguana, integrating your business workflows with these non-clinical applications is easier to do, particularly if you even pre-build those adapters or even templates just to help streamline that process. So on that topic of even modularizing or creating these templates, it can save time in the future too. One of our customers in the past came to us for help with a data conversion workflow from their HL7 message to patient data in Salesforce. So this was easy to do given Iguana's ability to connect to any type of interface and the fact that we already had a pre-built Salesforce adapter. So with that, the majority of the work of connecting to Salesforce API and identifying those Salesforce object parameters was already handled for us. So we could focus on building more of that main workflow of that interface and completing that interface in a much faster pace than usual. And just given that many of these non-clinical applications use APIs to integrate and communicate, even if you build out that template, it can be extremely helpful in reducing the development effort just in the long run. And another adapter that we actually internally built that we use internally is Twilio. So Twilio actually provides accessible telecommunication services such as SMS, email messaging, which our support team has used to alert or send notification based on 24/7 support requests. But in terms of the final step, when you are building out that API integration, it would be that testing and performance. So it is recommended to build out or to build in error handling codes, such as the use of retries, which Iguana has built-in modules for, or even protected calls to handle the various issues that can occur with HTTP connections. So that would be using a lot of those conditional statements. You may even have to split up some of your functions into separate modules just for better reusability. So let's recall that example I just discussed earlier and relate it to a different use case. So imagine you're an account manager. You may have checked all your emails and messages, and then you want to check in on a specific customer of yours. So there's so much information that you can obtain, either it being a project management platform to see upcoming projects in place, or even a CRM system to indicate if payments are on time, and then even collecting information on ongoing support tickets. So yes, there are different external tools. In the external differences like CRM or even different software vendor providers that integrations like Pipedrive provides Google Drive integration, Salesforce has a ton of integration or even marketplace apps in store. But that does sometimes come with additional cost, or it may be limited or restricted with the type of integration that's done. And then if you are already using Iguana for your current healthcare integration, with the resources that you have, you can automate these workflows just to simplify, again, your everyday tasks by focusing on what your main business workflow is, similar to how we internally use Iguana as well. So now we are just moving into that demo portion of the webinar. There are a couple of examples I can show you today and how ourselves here at INTERFACEWARE are using Iguana to create those internal workflows. For example, even integrating with any customer support ticket tools, we use Jira. There could be links that are auto-generated in project management sites like Pipedrive to redirect you to, say, for open tickets for a specific company. So this does make it easier if you're on the business side and you're accessing Pipedrive to automatically get directed to that page instead of having to, of course, manually search or even filter by company type. And then similarly using ClickUp to Pipedrive, how you can daily scan ClickUp project status and have that automated into Pipedrive for your sales team to see. You may wonder the reasoning behind why we use this workflow instead of automatically loading values. And essentially, it is easier to scale up in the sense that if you have one Iguana instance or channel that is connecting to a specific API, you can always build upon it for different use cases, and the logic would be the same. So if you needed to add more different types of systems to perform the same type of workflow, it's the API that's needed, and that URL that's returned would be the one that needs to be changed. All right, so we're going to get started with the first demo. So in this use case, we will be discussing how you can use Iguana to interconnect project management softwares like ClickUp to Pipedrive. If you aren't too familiar with either of these applications, ClickUp is essentially a productivity tool that our customer service team uses to help organize, plan, collaborate on tasks and projects, and provide that day-to-day updates. And then we also use Pipedrive. That's another CRM software that we internally use just to manage any sort of sales pipelines and even track customer interactions. So what this demo would showcase is a high-level overview of how we can use Iguana to automate this internal workflow. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my screen over here. All right, so I'm going to be put in the shoes of one of our solutions architect. So here in ClickUp, I have my dashboard to view all of my current projects. So we can go in and click into my first integration project. Here, my tasks would be just commenting on any sort of updates based on project timelines and meetings. So this would be essentially one of the main applications I would be using day to day. Now, if I were to be put in the shoes of a sales representative, I would be using Pipedrive on a daily basis just to track customer interactions or even sales pipeline. Now, in terms of in a sales perspective, I would also want to check up on the status of how projects or even timelines are doing for certain customers, but that would require me to have access or gain access to ClickUp, log in each time, check in on a specific customer. So you can see already that could be time consuming. So how can we make this easier for a sales rep to view all that information in one place? So this is where Iguana will play that pivotal role. So here in my Iguana, I do have a channel set up with a from HTTPS component that is building out that web server that will allow you to receive and process a web server request. In this case, my URL path matches the common name click to Pipedrive along with the ID. And the ID is significant because this is exactly what we take from that ClickUp company ID as well. So essentially the script in Iguana is connecting to Pipedrive's and ClickUp's API. And how it was built is that it's hitting that ClickUp API URL endpoint to retrieve that ID. And this facilitates that workflow of when notes are updated in ClickUp, it'll automatically be generated in Pipedrive automatically. So the URL over here, again, what I have in my HTTPS settings would be copied over into my ClickUp project status or the Pipedrive integration URL. And for example, if the channel is started. So if I were to make any sort of updates, I can just automatically click into that integration URL. And then it does provide that confirmation that the note has been successfully uploaded into Pipedrive. If we go into Pipedrive, we can see that note automatically being updated. So this is a great way to say a customer success team to provide constant updates to a sales team member on project status or even updates. And then even from a sales side, it does save a lot of time as you just need to access Pipedrive to view that queue information or that key information that's siloed into different systems. And then similarly, we can take a look at another different use case. We also use Iguana to auto-generate links in Pipedrive to access all customer-related support tickets or even redirect to relevant documents for each customer. So this always reverts back to that main pain point of different departments having access to different application. So it is so much easier to have direct links that are authorized via token for applications, or just even having one tool to store all that information you need access to. So I am just going to go back to that same screen again. So we internally do use Pipedrive to store a lot of our different information. So links to license portals, CRMs, support tickets, and even file drives. In Iguana, I do have a second channel set up that connects to Pipedrive's API. And the purpose of this channel is that it essentially generates a redirect URL to any other application. And this can be either Google Drive, or if it's a license portal, or even a customer support ticket portal. But the way the redirect works is that, say you're using Pipedrive and accessing any company that you do create, here, if you scroll down, there are specific fields. Like, for example, there's links to Google Drive and then license URL, if there's even a support URL as well. But the links here are tied to the equivalent Pipedrive redirect channel that was created in the Iguana server. We also have it built out in the sense that when we connect to Pipedrive's custom fields API endpoint, and when we have this refresh button when we have this refresh set button that's based on the ID, it will auto-generate these links as well. So similar to that ClickUp example that I've shown before, it does retrieve that company ID. In this case, it is 1. And then again, at the end of these links, it is just specifying that company ID, which is 1 again. It does auto-generate the links for those different fields. Now, that you can be able to go to any company, you can create a company and be able to generate those links, again, automatically. But in Iguana's module, we created a template and kept it consistent for any company that's created in Pipedrive. So for example, if we look into the license, we have that server name that stays consistent, Pipedrive that stays consistent, organization or org that stays consistent. And then if it was grabbing a Google Drive link, that would be changed to Drive. If it's license, it's license. But the last part of it is concatenating that last ID portion that you would gain from, or you would obtain from that Pipedrive API component. But essentially, when you do create a fresh new company on Pipedrive, for example, and provide that ID, the Iguana channel will auto-generate all of these redirect URLs to either centralized information for, say, Google Drive. Once that's been generated, you can easily click into it, and it would redirect you to that Google Drive folder for that specific company. So this is super beneficial for anyone in the company just to see all relevant information regarding this specific Iguana instance or this specific Pipedrive. Pipedrive or even many other applications have APIs that you can have Iguana connect to, say for reading fields, generating, updating, or in my case, it's redirecting. And then similarly, we do actually use Jira, our support ticketing system, to redirect links to support tickets for all customers. So I do have just a company created for support tickets, but if you're interested, for example, looking at a list of support tickets for a certain company, we can take that same logic to generate direct links for even support tickets. And it's definitely less time consuming. Everything is all in one place and organized by company type as well. So for example, that just again redirects you for this iNTERFACEWARE's support tickets. But as I mentioned, all systems do provide APIs to connect to different endpoints. So if you do have a lot of customization in how you want to implement those business workflows. And that actually leads us to the end of this webinar. Now, many of you may have known Iguana as that healthcare integration engine, able to connect to any system or data, but its flexibility does extend beyond that. If you are using Iguana today, take advantage of its full capabilities in automating business workflows to just streamline operations, even reduce that manual effort and even the cost of resources and even training. So it is a perfect way to connect your internal operating systems in order to combine or even integrate your data to support future strategic, even organization objectives as well. I do want to thank everyone once again for joining us today. And I hope you were all able to learn something new about Iguana.
And that brings us to all the time that we have today. Thank you all for the great questions. We hope today's session, like Regaah said, was informative. And if you have any feedback, we would love to hear it. You can email marketing@interfaceware.com or email your account manager. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.